There is only one problem really with these sparklines, and that is their relative heights and lines, depending on the style you've chosen, is all based on the range that they are looking at. So if we take our Sparklines file and the datasheet, we see we've got column bar charts here, and we've told it to highlight the highest value. So the highest value there, the green, actually represents 34 bananas. Now in the second set of values, the highest value, again green, represents 56 apples. So you cannot really compare these sparklines to each other because the height is only relative to the data that it's looking at. So this set of values comes from here. When it looks at the second sparkline here, it doesn't look at the other sparklines here. Even though they're in the same group, we can see that when we click, they get a blue border. So they're in the same group, but they're not relative to each other. They're only relative to the data they are looking at, which is fine as long as you read them that way. However, there may be occasions when you wish to compare sparklines down here. So I might want to see the highest number of fruit sold against any of the months. Well, at the moment I can't tell that because the highest green bar is a different value as you move down, dependent on the values that have been sold. Luckily, somebody at Microsoft has thought that there must be a solution to this, and they've provided one. So if you have a sparkline group, as we have here, and you want the sparklines to be effectively compared to each other, then we simply need to make one adjustment, really. We make sure that we're in the sparkline, it doesn't matter which one we're looking at. Go to the Sparkline Tools Design and come across to the axes. What you'll notice in here is that the minimum and the maximum value for the vertical axis, therefore controlling the height of those columns, is set automatically for each sparkline, both minimum and maximum. All we need to do is change these settings to same for all sparklines. So we don't even need to control what the minimum value is, we just set it to be the same, but also same for all sparklines for the maximum value. And then you can relatively compare your sparklines down that group. So now I can see that actually that big green bar there is closest to the highest value, and that's referring to the 78 apples. And in fact, even the second biggest here is only 67. So these sparklines are now relatively in size to each other, not just the range of values that they're looking at across here. Obviously, if that's not what you want, you don't want to compare them sparkline on sparkline, then you just return that setting to its default, which is automatic for each sparkline for the minimum value and automatic for each sparkline for the maximum value. This works also in our share values, where we have a line style. And again, it's relative to each other because you'll notice that this goes from 1.2 up and down a bit to 4, and the 4's there as the max near the top of the cell. But this one here near the top is your highest value, but that's actually 12. So they're not relative to each other. So we click into the sparklines. From the Sparkline Tools and Design, we change the setting for the axis to be the same for all sparklines and the same for the maximum. And that way you can then compare the sparklines between each other. So I can see here that the value of these shares, the alpha ones, are certainly much higher than any of the others, but I can still see the change within those values. Because they're all relative to each other, this line now is much lower in the cell, and the little peak at 4 is only a tiny peak now, because these shares are much higher than that, up in the 12s. So sometimes you do want them to be compared to each other, and sometimes you don't. Well, the option's there. The default is that they are not compared to each other. Also bear in mind that the setting, changing between automatic and same, will only refer to the sparkline group you are in. In our datasheet, the sparklines along the bottom do not form part of a group, so these could not be told to use the same scale because we created them as separate individual sparklines. So it's only the group sparklines that can be told to have the same vertical minimum value and vertical maximum value.